you run with Paige, who's one of the athletes that I coach, and
Mm-hmm.
I have no better way to kick this off. And I have no idea where this goes either. But I literally just got off the phone with her like 20 minutes ago, and I was like, "Is there anything I should ask Max?" And she's like, "Ask him about the bike story. Apparently, like your bike broke one time."
Yeah, once we were funny story. Yeah, so usually I bike along with Paige on our sessions, and we go down this little trail, and it's not that much of a story. Actually, we were just about 6K down a trail, and somehow a little stick had flicked up into my spokes, jammed into my derailleur, snapped my derailleur right off.
Gosh.
And for 6K, if you can imagine, obviously I couldn't pedal back. Yeah. So I was basically straddling my bike and like pushing my legs like this in like a double row motion.
Like a Flintstone.
Yeah.
Bike.
So it was, it was a good one. And in the meantime, I'd had like a considerably new pair of running shoes I was wearing, and it like ripped the bottoms of them off.
Oh gosh.
Not
good.
That's the best story I got with Paige, with the things we run into.
I did have my bike one time. I forget. I think I just had a cable snap, and it was stuck in like the big chain. So I was just like pedaling through mud for like 45 minutes to get back home.
Yeah, I mean, there's some sort of being stuck in the big chain ring. It's got to have some sort of
benefit there,
translated effect.
Yeah. Oh man. So kind of tease who you are a little bit and what you do, and then like give us a little bit of maybe a snapshot of what your demographic of athlete looks like, just so people have a bit of background.
So my name is Max. My coaching business is Max Runs. Nice and simple. I've been doing this for about 3 years. When I started off, I didn't have a specific demographic that I was aiming at, but what happened for me was my specific demographic turned out to be just essentially the same, the people that were on the same style of journey in running as myself, because I got into running a little bit later in life. I'm 26 years of age, and I didn't run in university, college, high school. I did a bit of like some track in the earlier grades, but I got into running a little bit later in life. I was about 18 when I started kind of getting my groove with it.
Yeah.
So what I found is in the midst of this, when I started this about 3 years ago, I had a friend who was actually into bodybuilding coaching, and I had went through a bad injury, an ice skating accident. I broke my ankle, had surgery on it. It was like an intensive thing, and I was not able to run. And he had said to me at the time, he's like, "Oh, you should consider coaching a little bit." And at first I was like, "No, like this isn't a thing. Like I'm not going to coach people online." Like, because I was just like the super blue collar runner, where like I just not a big social presence. I just did my own thing.
Yeah.
And I about a month later, he goes like, "Hey, like I have somebody who's interested in some coaching." And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." Fast forward, I actually coach the same girl still to this day, 3 years later. Nice. Super proud of that. And that's how it all started. So I coach more or less, my demographic would be probably 16 to 50 years of age, and like almost secondary sport athletes, if you might.
Secondary sport athletes, like explain that a little more.
Maybe played hockey in high school, and then they didn't go on to like post-secondary sport or chase that sport throughout life. And then, they running gave them a little bit of a buzz, and they wanted to, I think a lot of people still have that fire where they want to, get good at something, or they want to be able to compete. And that's kind of where I sat. So yeah, that's the group for the most part.
I think the good thing about, the majority of our listenership, I'm sure, is that people are not either exclusively running or they're not running as professionals. So in that sense, like people have other priorities and things they're working on, which I think has a lot of value. And there's probably more people that are in that boat today than maybe ever before. So yeah, I certainly will be able to give a lot of good insights for a lot of those people.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything that like you've changed your mind on a lot over the last 3 years of coaching that stands out to you?
That's a very good question.
Just like the philosophy of the way you coach people or whatever.
Yeah. Not hugely. Not hugely. My coaching has changed like throughout the years. There's no way I can deny that, because I, as an athlete, like I'm always reading new stuff. I'm always testing new stuff for myself. I'm connecting with other coaches, but it has never taken a big turn in any world like that. And I think that specifically comes from, as I said, my entry into the running world wasn't so much of one where I had a lot of support via, let's say, if I ran in college. So a lot of my learning came from myself. And at that time, I was just kind of digging through some old school books from the like early running boom, whenever that was, sometime in the 1980s. And there's like some dynamite literature back then. So I'm lucky enough, and I think somewhere where I've been able to thrive as a coach is my base was built off of some real, like the old school blue collar style of training. And then I just kind of built and molded that kind of as I went along.
Yeah. One of the things that makes this challenging is that like so many people have, like, running is so broad, and that's like you could run a 5K, you could run an ultra marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And while like the training is going to look vastly different from those things, there are some sort of continuities between them as well. I think maybe what would be helpful for maybe our average listener is if they're thinking about proving, let's say, more in like the 10K half marathon type distance.
Yeah.
Just to kind of narrow it down just a little bit. For a lot of people who are coming to you and say they've been doing their, like, organizing their own training, and again, let's just use the example of a 10K.
Yeah.
And they're looking to improve that capacity, mm-hmm. right? Specifically, it's like, what typically do you find that people are either doing wrong, or things that you immediately kind of adjust, or that you know that your style of coaching is usually different from what they're kind of self-selecting to do, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. So I think intentionality is the biggest difference between when you're just like self-programmed or quote unquote doing your own thing, versus having somebody, any coach. And that means intentionality going into sessions is a big game changer. And I think for all, 5K to marathon to even ultra marathon, that goes all the way across the entire spectrum of distances is intentionality in your sessions. So, you always hear the people say like easy days easy, hard days hard. Yep. But I think that's even on a higher level. It's, knowing, having a superior level of control in your workouts beyond that. So not only are you having set workouts and knowing, let's say it's a VO2 max session or a threshold session, you can start to go on, even in like an AI-based program, and they'll program you these workouts. You can use ChatGPT, whatever. The thing is, if you don't understand the functionality of a threshold or a VO2 max session and what that should feel like, and you're not going to that session with, hey, this should feel like this or this should feel like that, you might lose the idea of the session. And when you start doing that in the running world, you're a recipe for disaster. So
yeah, maybe in practicality, does this look like a lot of people are just kind of either not getting after it as much as they should on like their challenging days, mm-hmm. and or letting their easy days kind of bleed up into higher zones?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it in simple terms. And yeah, like I wouldn't change the way you said it.
Yeah, I think generally when, and maybe this also probably depends who's coming to you and the amount of history they have with running. likely if someone doesn't have like a super robust training history, you know, if they haven't been running for like, you know, a decade plus, so they haven't built up their mileage to, you know, a marathon distance or something,
Mhm.
you know, a 10K is going to feel like a significant amount to be able to race it.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that just start with like adding in a lot more of like that easier volume to just sort of like build up their base?
Yeah. It's just building up your base. I mean, like at the end of the day, I think volume is the biggest predictor of race success. Success being finishing it good, and finishing it in what somebody might consider a quick time for themselves. But I would add on to that where it's not as much as you might think. You know, it's everybody likes to talk about volume being the big thing, but I think it's also quite the trap that you can get into. Just add, because you know you can start to feel quite bad very fast.
Say you do have someone and you do want to up that. Like, do you have any like constraints you put on them, or you have like any rules that or guidelines that you like to follow, like upping by a certain amount? Do you look for, are you looking for them to stay within certain zones? Or are you looking for them to only increase by certain amounts? Maybe what, if you give us any more specifics around that?
Yeah. So usually in a build, let's say somebody comes to me and they're not super robust in their training background. I'll increase by, you know, everybody says the rule of about 5 to 10% per week, but also that changes within frequency as well. I look to increase frequency before I increase single session volume more. You know, I'd rather see somebody running 4 times a week rather than 3 larger sessions, you know, every 100%. Obviously that's changes on a case by case basis, but I would sit between, you know, adding 5 to 10% per week, but also looking to increase frequency at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Why frequency first?
I find single session load is where you can get into the nasty stuff when it comes to running, because, you know, with running and overall, I find you kind of sit on a 24 to 48 hour cycle, and you need to be doing sessions that are manageable in that 24 to 48 hour session.
You're saying that's a good
cycle.
session frequency?
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to say here is I think you have to get your body used to decent sessions, like just as in like decent volume. It doesn't have to be intensity, and recovering, you know, within 24 hours.
Gotcha.
And consistently build that up instead of like a single session that's getting, let's say you have a 5K Monday, 10K Wednesday, and then let's say a 15 on Saturday is your long run. And somebody who's building up to like, let's say a half marathon or even a marathon, I would look up to build frequency to, you know, 3 10s and maybe a 14 or a 10 in the coming weeks, rather than big single session stuff.
That makes a lot of sense, because like in the exercise, like if we're just using a lifting session example for myself or for some of the listeners, it'd be like, okay, I'm not going to have somebody who does 2 sessions a week do like an upper and a lower.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they literally are then lifting whatever exercise once a week, and they're just going to be sore perpetually, and they're going to be super beat up from it.
Exactly. No,
so then it's, if you can get them to be a little bit more tolerant of what they're doing, and not only that, but they're going to get a lot of like their neuromuscular like learning benefits of like learning how to do the patterns effectively, which like for a newbie, you get so many gains out of that.
Huge. And you're so spot on with that.
Yeah. And so running would be very similar in the sense that like, if you can teach your body how to handle that pattern and build some tolerance and some skill within it a little bit quicker, frequency is like probably the best tool for that.
100%. And that's all our body understands, right? Our body doesn't register all this external information that our eyes do. Our body only registers like what it endures throughout the day, whether that be strength training or running. So if you're taking it down to the most basic level, it's, you know, what inputs are you trying to put into your body? And if you can increase the input, or increase the frequency of it, it's almost always favorable rather than a larger single load.
Yeah. So if you are like upping someone's frequency, let's just say they're doing three runs a week, and you want to get them to at least 4 or 5, let's say. When you jump them from 3 to 4, are you cutting out the volume in the other sessions to still meet that like 5 to 10% jump?
It depends. I would say I'm always like, it still follows that 5 to 10% rule, maybe with a little bit more leniency overall. But I think the big thing there is when I'm increasing volume, intensity is taking a big step down.
Yeah.
Because, having a lot of intensity or even moderate to low intensity, of total volume in a work week while adding volume, you can get into some trouble with it. And I think, just to add on to that, that's the whole name of the game when it comes to running, is not getting into trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're looking to increase like more volume, and you're looking to keep people on the easier side of things, do you prefer to write that as just easy, smooth, like using language? Do you use zones, like heart rate based zones? Do you use marathon effort pace? Like what kind of and obviously it could be multiple of those, but then like why might be a case per case reason for one or the other?
Depends on the athlete, 100%. It always depends on the athlete. It depends on the level that they're at. But for me, I'm an effort guy. I'm an effort guy and duration. So okay. I'm almost always measuring things by 90% of my athletes are just time based. So like, let's say 30 minutes easy.
Yeah.
And I start my athletes off by just like, hey, we're going by feel. And I'm kind of helping them just kind of learn what feel might be for them. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'll make adjustments accordingly because I can kind of tell what's going on, hopefully. But it's super simple in those terms, super simple, where it's time based. It's time on feet. And to anybody doing a prep, let's say for 5K to marathon, the number one thing is just time on feet. So kind of throwing pace out the window for the first 8 weeks of a build is the way.
Yep. I think the other thing about duration is that it's a lot easier for an athlete to not push too deep when they're working with duration. Like regardless of how fast you run, 30 minutes is 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it kind of encourages you to stay easy, where if you're like, hey, go 7K, they're like, I get this done a little quicker. I can run a little faster. And all of a sudden they're like creeping up.
Yeah. And it levels the playing field too, right? Because like, in most builds, there's just certain times that you want to be, and especially when it gets into like specific phases, for if you're doing like a half or a full marathon.
Yeah.
There's certain markers that have been called, you have to hit this 2-hour mark, or you have to hit this 2.5-hour mark. So then it evens the playing field. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in the world of Strava and these apps and sharing our runs, we get less consumed by, the numbers that are attached to certain distances. So maybe like a 5K or a 10K, you know what I mean? So if you have a 10K or if you have a 5K threshold block in the middle of a workout, and it's just a single 5K threshold, and your threshold's 4:05 to 4:10, well, I'm sure as hell trying to hit under 20 minutes in that 5K. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It just happens. We attach time to distances, unfortunately.
Yeah. For the majority of your sessions, when you have like a built-in like rest period, how often is that like a jog as a recovery versus a walk versus like a passive rest?
It depends on the athlete, but I'm I like to steer towards recovery sessions, as in just super light runs, super duper light runs. And that depends on the athlete, because some athletes just need to go, I'm not running today. And there's two parties involved with that. It's the recovery run party, and there's the sedentary rest party, or just some active walking. Neither are wrong. Neither are wrong. Both work. Both can show up to the race and perform very well. But I find in the top percentiles of, if you're trying to squeeze out those marginal gains, then we start to look into recovery runs as a necessity.
Yeah. Do you use cross training at all for any of your athletes?
Yes. Yeah. I do coach a couple triathletes.
Okay, cool.
On a pretty basic level. And it depends, again, I am a big supporter of cross training for some.
Yeah.
Does cross training replace running? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It just doesn't.
Yeah. I feel like my opinion of this is like sort of, if somebody's got access to it and they enjoy it, then it's like, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But, and maybe it would just depend on like what, if we have a runner and they're like, they don't enjoy biking, I'm not going to like probably make them go out and get a bike and jump on it, but there will be still probably something for active recovery.
Mm-hmm.
It would just probably end up being like, go for a 90-minute hike or something. Right.
Yeah.
Versus, yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of nice to get off the road sometimes too.
For sure. I agree with you. And some people do very well with a lot of cross training. Some don't. And like, I think we can kind of get into the trap of training volume in the era of social media, where I will say to some that if you're just trying to build up training volume for a big hours during your week and you're going to sit on a bike for a while, it might not be conducive to running super fast if you have that energy. You know what I mean? I just think it can be a bit of a trap by chasing big volume into cross training, but I think cross training can be a very good tool if used properly.
Yeah. I mean, is there like a demographic of athlete that you have in mind that like that might have the best like transference for, or like also like on the other side of that, like why some people might not respond as well to it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes. And there is. There's two kind of athlete types that I think exist out there. I think there's the athletes that need a decent amount of like stimulus, but not too much. And then there's runners that need to stay really up on stimulus. They need to stay on running to stay sharp. If they're off a couple of days, they start to lose sharpness. These guys in this other party, they get aerobic gains quick. They retain sharpness. The big concern on week to week is freshness. If they're not fresh, they're not recovered, they're going to get into trouble. And these are the responder types. Both of these parties one's not better than the other. I think there's professionals on both ends of it, but I think knowing who is who is most important. And I find the group that requires a little bit more freshness and recovery can benefit from some more cross training, rather than the guys who require more of a constant stimulus to stay sharp, if you might, in running specifically.
Yeah. So in other words, one group may be able to take on the volume they need to stay aerobically fit with some other modality, say it's biking.
Mm-hmm.
And then that might allow them to come back in and have a little bit less eccentric load,
Mm-hmm.
where then when they go to run, they feel sharper.
Spot on.
Okay.
And way to define it. I appreciate you defining it, because that's it's a more concise way to put it. And I find those runners they can be a little bit more of the athletic type and more of the fast twitch muscle fiber type sometime as well, where they can get out, smash workouts, smash some short stuff on the track, but are also very, like, they can get injured. They can put down a lot of power. And I think personally for like a lot of athletes that I take on that maybe have a big background in strength training, or maybe let's say CrossFit or High Rocks, they're usually, they're carrying a couple extra pounds. And you have to be super conscious of it.
Yeah.
In a good way. Like,
yes. Yeah.
It's as simple as it gets. Like it's a car, right? And if you have a big engine, like you better have good tires, or like you're going to tear the tires off.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, a lot of the people that I work with, like specifically the CrossFitters that I'm writing run training for, it's the, they're the number of instances where their session volumes getting above 10K is just incredibly low, because for that reason, it's like, one, that because they're bigger, their power output usually is up. And then also like, they're just so biased towards strength and power that like what is like a 40-minute time trial effort feels super easy when they start off.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you were to go run a 10K time trial pace, it would be like hard fairly quickly. Whereas like for them, it's like the pace is easy, and then it just starts to fall apart after they get over 20 minutes or whatever.
Exactly. And I think that's where like the mechanics also come into it.
Yeah.
And that's the group where like when your mechanics start to fall apart, then it's just, you're out the window. And like, I think that ties into what we were talking about earlier. That group, once again, once mechanics start to go out the window, it can get, it can get bad.
So maybe for like that group that we were just kind of referring to, which more of them would fall into like they want to run when they're feeling pretty sharp. They might get beat up from doing just more run volume as a whole. Would that be a case where maybe they get, if they're doing like threshold type paces, are they just going to get like a little bit more rest time? Are they just going to do like shorter intervals? With like, again, relatively short rest time, but like maybe repeat it more where they're not getting as deep into fatigue. What have you found that works good for that group?
I would just say like one less rep, or you have to, especially in threshold. And like, thank you for bringing up threshold, because I think that's a big subject of running today. And that's what everybody likes to talk about in the endurance space. Generally speaking, you have to leave 2 or 3 reps in the tank, but I think you can even leave 4 reps in the tank. I think pulling yourself back is so important. And I think it's hitting on a part where I have a lot of success as a coach, because those sessions that are spoken about, the sessions that the classic threshold sessions that people do, I do them, I prescribe them, but it's just always a little bit less than what the athlete needs. And by doing that, you just have 100 times more success in your sessions, and you go into your sessions feeling fresher. You go into your sessions feeling strong, and that's how you become a good runner, like and a consistent good runner. Because anybody can race in training. Like I can put down some huge workouts in training, but the big idea here is not running good training. It's running good races.
No. Do you have like a general place in terms of like total working time that you like to see people for different types of efforts? Again, like if I were just like throw you a random athlete and be like, all right, Max, do the running, the run coaching. It's like where obviously you're going to look at their past training and see where they're at. But like outside of that, like again, you're saying like, okay, I don't want to see them get too deep into this. Do you have any like guidelines as kind of like, okay, it's like rough boundaries, this might be like where they're at?
Yeah. So without knowing their background, the only thing I would do is I would just start, like, progression of workouts is the big thing in running. So we start off with what I think is reasonable, and that's always on a case-by-case basis. And then we just progress it. And as a coach, that's my responsibility to see how they're progressing in it. So if you're starting with, let's say, 2 by 5 minutes at threshold, and then we do that workout, good feedback. Next week, we have 3 by 5 minutes at threshold. good feedback, and then we just progress along, because that's as simple as it is with running. It's progression in workouts and more time at intensity. And threshold itself, the training zone is recognized as the effort you can hold for 60 minutes. In the cycling world, I think they also consider it like FTP. So obviously you don't want to get over like 60 minutes of total threshold volume in a single session, because that means you just did the entire like gas tank of a workload that you physiologically have. So I think I would usually cap it at 35 to 40 minutes for most athletes. So that sits at the range of like 6 to 8 by 5 minutes at threshold.
Yep. Would you change that at all if it was somebody, since you coach Paige, like Paige?
Like, okay, sorry.
Like, would it change for her, like the duration of that? Like someone who's going to be skewed like down towards,
I mean,
mile to like maybe 5K is like a better event for them. Was that? I don't know. Does that
threshold
make sense?
is the name of the game. Like, are you talking? Do you mean in an intensity wise?
Yeah. So for example, like if I were going to be to write Paige a threshold session,
yes,
I probably would have the paces be slightly elevated above like an hour time trial for her, and I would probably give her less duration.
Okay. Yeah. No, 100%. I would too. Yeah.
Okay.
I would do like I mean, there's the classic afternoon session for the Norwegian model, which is like the 400s at 10K pace. So, I mean, they prescribe up to like 25, but then you'd look to like for somebody like Paige, you're spot on where you'd want to do a little bit faster with shorter reps and maybe a sedentary rest. So just mechanically, you're protecting yourself a little bit more.
Yeah. In my mind, I feel like that could be a good strategy for that athlete that you were describing before.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe like more neuromuscularly efficient. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think anybody can benefit from preserving neuromuscular quality, like in general. And, I don't want the listeners here to try and categorize themselves in between this too severely, because everybody can do a little bit better with trying to preserve sharpness. I will add in that's a different party when we start to get into like marathon, because durability is a key determining factor of success in it.
Yeah.
But for those people under, half marathon and under, I think everybody can take a page out of the book of, preservation of quality and preservation of sharpness.
Yeah. And likely if somebody is prepping for a longer race, the other qualities are just less important, frankly. Not that they don't matter, because you still want the paces to feel easy at marathon. Mm-hmm. Like when you're starting off, they shouldn't feel challenging.
Yeah.
And you can do things that will help them not feel challenging. But at the same time, like the biggest thing is like, okay, you're not running that fast. It's just that you're running obviously a long time. You get tired doing it. So it's like, you got to be ready for that.
Yeah. And it's all about durability as it goes up.
I want to go back to the thing, and we kind of touched on it before, but I want to get maybe a little bit deeper into that answer of like when you might give like full rest versus a walking rest versus a jogging. Like again, if you're giving, I don't know, 5 by 5 at threshold or something, right?
Yep.
It's like, what does that look like between there? And again, might it change if somebody's more in like tempo type efforts?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And threshold can be addressed anyway, and the rest between sets can be altered according to the athlete, depending on where they're at. And the key factors that go into that is the race that they're doing, how close that is to threshold pace, and how far we are along in the program. And why I say that is because earlier on in a program, I don't mind if we're taking, let's say, 2 minutes rest, but more or less the standard, what I would say is about 90 seconds of jogging between reps. And that kind of sits between the standard of 5K to full marathon. But when we start to get later into a program, we might target, maybe steady between the efforts. If I have an athlete that maybe goes a little bit too fast on their threshold, and I have a little bit of a concern of that, I'll start to do like alternating. So I'll do like a popular workout I prescribe is like 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, alternating. So 3 minutes at threshold, 3 minutes at moderate. And you can't cheat threshold when you're doing that. And you can't, like, you're gonna, like, I'm not a big numbers guy, but the graph's gonna go a certain way. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like I'm like the puppeteer behind. So I'll kind of adjust how that works, and that'll kind of tell me where they're at. And I wish I could give you a really specific answer on how I adjust that.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit tough. Like, I always try and keep recovery between reps to be easy. Like, it's always easy. It's always easy. You just kind of regain composure. You catch your breath. Your brain calms down. Your nervous system has a second to calm down. You're like, okay, I'm going to go into the next one. And then you go into it. But at the end of the day, a threshold session is one thing, and it's to get time into threshold. And because of that, threshold isn't race specific. It's still in a base phase, right? Mm. We can do threshold into like a race specific phase, but that's, it's not its exact world. In the workouts that are more specific to the distance, then I think rest and how that rest is happening or recovery is happening is more important.
Mm. Yeah, that brings up a really good point. I mean, I think a lot of runners, and this is why somebody would hire somebody like you, is that when they're in charge of their own training, it ends up, they kind of fall into the same rhythms with things. And there's not as much like a clear transition from this is more generalized, like physiological development towards like, okay, we're now prepping for a race specifically, and how those two things are different. So this is my interpretation of the conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what we've been talking about is more of like the physiological development. In other words, like further away from races, stuff that you would do when you're not having a race that's like coming up on the calendar. Is that a fair assessment? And then like, how does that change once you get closer to a race?
Absolutely. Everything we've kind of went over is all, weeks out from a race, and it's engine building, if you might.
Yep.
And honestly, I think our conversation will always skew towards engine building, because that's like my ethos, and my ethos is always about a big base. Like that's what I'm about, and how that transitions for the average person. And you're spot on. Most people don't have a transition phase where it goes into base. That happens in, let's say, 8 to 6 weeks out. Depending on the race, and for all the listeners, a specific phase just means you're starting to do paces specific to your race and your race distance, and your race goal, of course, to get your body used to just running that pace. Simple as that. Because for the people listening, there's two things when it comes to running in a build. You're building your engine, which is just your aerobic fitness, how fit you are, if you might. And then there's the getting the body used to the demands of said race. With that, it's not only getting used to the demands of the race. So let's say specifically for a marathon, it's getting some late session work in at marathon pace. So let's say for a marathoner, that's, let's say, a 20 to 30K long run with the last 5 to 10K at marathon pace. Why we're doing that, while your legs are under fatigue, we're just getting used to running at marathon pace. So that's an example of race specific. Whereas maybe a 5K, we're doing 3 to 5 reps at 1 kilometer at race pace, with some sedentary rest, as in standing rest, between the reps.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I'm jumping back to what we mentioned before. When you had mentioned maybe the walking rest versus jogging versus sedentary rest. Yeah, I think a lot of that just comes down to the fitness level of the athlete, and how and maybe more specifically, what I mean by that is like if jogging doesn't feel like rest to you, then you probably should either walk or just stand there.
For sure. No, I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. And I think that probably is where like your and I connection between the types of runners we're training might differ, right?
Yeah.
Because most people I run, like, they're always running. Like, they would beg me for some sedentary rest between their sessions, but it's very rare for me to prescribe just standing or walking rest.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what's also probably going to translate the best to races.
Yeah.
At no point do you just stand there. Hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, it happens. It has happened to me.
Yeah. So you're obviously running constantly. So your systems get no reprieve. So that's what you need to prepare people for. So it's like, as you get closer, that's what you gotta do. And then it's like, obviously though, at the same time, you do have to prioritize like the specific pace that somebody's running as they're in race prep. So that's where like something, 5K paces, obviously there's a point where you just can't run at that pace. So you can't will yourself to do it anymore. So it's like making sure that you're giving them probably more, sedentary rest where they're actually clearing fatigue to the level that they need to be able to keep going.
Yeah. And I think it's a general rule of thumb is like the faster the race distance, and we can even say down to the middle distances, like even 1500. 1500 versus marathon, I think there is a progression of like the faster you're getting. I think it even goes down to sprinting. The more rest that can be given to you, I feel like, because you're just, the quality is getting so high that if you're not giving enough rest, your session is just, you don't know what you're training for.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I think that reconnects back to what we were saying about like the two different groups of athletes as well, because I think everybody has a predisposition toward their quote unquote distance or what their muscle fiber composition wants them to run at. Obviously it can be trained, and we've seen like the best marathoners have come from sometimes being the best 5K runners, and most athletes progress from all the way up. Some don't. But I think that's another thing to be said is every athlete, again, is different from what their disposition is and where they, like, what kind of training fits them best.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
All right. I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about, I think for you, obviously you've seen a bit of, or at least heard of what kind of Paige does on a weekly basis. Your triathletes are in a similar boat, probably a little bit different, because they have 3 disciplines where, a CrossFit athlete has 30 or 50 or whatever.
Something. A lot.
Which a lot of them are all variations of the same thing anyway. But anyway, basically, like my point is, like, we have also have people who are listening who probably are into, a high rocks or wanting to do lifting and running in more hybrid style. So for those people, at a certain point, like, you're only going to be able to increase run frequency so much. So like, and maybe I think maybe a good example might be a triathlete, because a lot of the higher level high rocks athletes, it just becomes more and more about the running anyway.
For sure. Yeah.
And they're just doing maybe some like basic supplemental strength training. They're just doing some minimal station work until they're more specific prep phase. So for like a triathlete where, the bike leg is going to be the longest of the three, that's like a better illustration of like when that kind of balance comes in. And again, this is a little bit challenging because they obviously will do like brick sessions sometimes where they mix them together and whatnot. But generally, like where are you kind of sitting as to like what like run frequency might look like for those types of athletes?
I would say 3 to 4 sessions per week
Yeah.
for a triathlete. Again, with triathletes, you said it's perfectly. Frequency is what I try and hit on a lot, because there's a lot of big single session volume, and I mean, personally, I don't have anybody at like the sprint or Olympic distance. It's the guys that are getting into long course stuff and Ironman. And I find the way that I can find success with them is just increasing run frequency, because rather than single session volume, obviously brick sessions are big, but when we take the 3 disciplines, swim, bike, run, and I'm not purely a triathlon coach, so it's not exactly my space, but we can say that swimming and running both require certain levels of neuromuscular adaptation that just come from reoccurring activity and time doing it. And I think, and swimming is not my space, and a lot of the triathletes I do coach go to a swimming like program that they do for 3 days a week or something. But I think they both sit in the same space where you just need to do it a lot. Your feel in the water gets better just by swimming a lot, and your drag is always lowering while you're swimming a lot. And it's the same as running. Your efficiency is getting better just based on how much you're doing it. So I find swimming and running requires a little bit more frequency than, let's say, the bike. The bike sits a little bit lower in frequency but higher in volume, because the bike is just a huge anchor just to build fitness. Whereas, let's say you're doing an Ironman distance, if you haven't practiced doing long runs, like you just don't got a chance. I don't care how fit you are, and I've done it. I've done marathons on like low volume, and just like, thinking that I was just the fittest man on earth, and having like the best fitness in the world, but not having the durability that's required to go the distance.
Yeah.
And you're not giving yourself a chance. Whereas I believe that, the bike, obviously, you have to have those big sessions in there, but you won't get punished as much.
Yeah. I think for me, what that comes down to is like swimming, and swimming especially is very like the feel of it is very important. But even like running is a highly coordinated skill. Where like the sharpness matters a lot, like you were saying before. Whereas cycling, you can manipulate your cadence and power, and like you're strapped in, so it's like you can only have so many variations in your cadence.
Exactly. And I'm a spin to win guy. And when it comes, like, I'm high cadence, like you gotta spin to win. That's just what I believe. So like for me, like, and when I'm programming bike stuff, it's not like I'm not programming any rocket science. Like it's very, very basic. It's very, very basic. Again, it's the same as running, where it's you're getting a bit of work at your FTP and your quote unquote threshold, and that's you're going to build massive amounts of speed by doing that.
Yeah. So I think maybe the common thread there between whether you're a high roxer, triathlete, CrossFitter, not that those are the same, but I think maybe the common theme would be like you in an ideal world, like the frequency would be fairly high. It's like of your options, like for like a CrossFitter especially, it would be a great example of this. It's like, okay, you could run once a week, but it's the same example I gave before of like the person starting their strength training. It's like, even if you spread that volume out across 2 sessions and it's like a very similar amount of volume, you're probably better off. And then it's like, okay, if you could get at least 2 to 3 sessions of that, your feel between sessions is just gonna be way better, and running will stop being a thing that like beats you up.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think again, for a triathlete, a little different because like they're probably at race weight, they're just geared a little bit more towards endurance,
Yeah.
whereas like the typical CrossFit athlete that I would coach who is super powerful, who doesn't enjoy running, but it's like a necessary part of their training.
Yeah.
It's like for those people, especially, it's like the durability side, but like durability built through frequency almost.
Exactly. And I think the trick for you guys is, and you guys as in CrossFitters is like keeping it super simple. Keeping it super simple, and just know like you got to be really happy that if you can get a certain amount of time where you're just banging your feet on the ground and moving forward. Like just if you can do that, incredible. Like getting too specific with running for let's say a hybrid athlete or a CrossFitter specifically, because you guys are under a lot of training load. Like there's a lot of different moving parts. I think just a little bit of frequency and super duper easy is the way to go, because your fitness is gonna translate, and what you just got to protect yourself is from the lower leg stuff. Like the CrossFitters, and I other than Paige, I don't have any, but I would assume that lower legs is just where you can get absolutely torched from running, because you guys have, for what I believe, probably very strong posterior chains. You have healthy glutes, healthy hamstrings that are all going to fire very well. But like calf, Achilles, your feet are not ready. I think for CrossFitters, and what I can say for anybody that's listening, is just having frequency, as in maybe 2 to 3 times, but super duper easy. And enjoy it. Like treat it like it's your active recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, a lot of people that I work with, it's like they understand, okay, I can go 20 minutes easy on a bike. I can go 20 minutes easy on a rower. But like they struggle just to do that with running. Like it's just, it's the paces deteriorate so much that it's still not that easy. So I think one is like being able to just get the running specific fitness and tolerance to be where running at an easy pace for 20-30 minutes is very tolerable and feels easy. Which I'm sure you've had people that probably have come to you that are more novice who again, not CrossFitters, not super athletic. They just literally, they're like, hey, I want to start running more consistently. I'm going to hire somebody. And it's like the tolerance isn't there. And like step one is like building some,
just get used to it,
just getting some time on the feet.
Yeah. And like I can, maybe I should have started with this, but I do coach a lot of amateur athletes who are just getting into it. There's a lot of people I coach who like don't run. And there's a lot of people I've coached that are just like, hey, I run once in a while and it speaks to me and I want to learn how to do it. And I don't enjoy coaching. I mean, I probably enjoy coaching less experienced athletes than more experienced athletes, to be honest with you. Like these guys are more of a handful. Where I don't know where I was going with this, but the more novice guys they're a little bit more malleable to work with, but it's all about keeping it simple. And I would challenge probably a lot of CrossFitters that maybe are running into this problem is to take off your watch. Don't do it on the assault runner. Don't do it on a treadmill. Don't do it with your CrossFit buddies. Do it like, by yourself and just try it out. You know what I mean? Because I think we just naturally, we like to push, and, a lot of CrossFitters I find to be very athletic and obviously very committed people. And I think if you're trying to do that in the running space, it'll just humble you extremely quick.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing with, it has now become that way with running, where it was previously, I think, less this way, where you might have like a stopwatch.
Yeah, no, exactly.
All you get is like some time and maybe some landmarkers that but it's like now you constantly have a pace in your face essentially.
Yeah.
And so like for again, my CrossFit people, it's like they got the rower, they got the air runner, they got the assault bike, and all of them just have an instantaneous pace there. And now it's like your watch also has that for running, where it's very easy to obsess over live paces or whatever.
For sure.
Yeah. And just again, so like I've actually found myself doing this where I'll say like, flip the rower stream back. Don't look at it for the 20 minutes easy or whatever. Do you tell people not to take a watch with them, or like, what does that look like?
I mean, asking a runner to take their watch off is like, I'd have no,
I need to track these
everybody
miles.
would just be like, okay, this guy, he's a terrible coach. But, I recommend it to everybody. Like, hey, just try and like get away from pace. But I'm like just as guilty. Like, I consider myself adept in the world of running, and I find myself chasing pace. I find myself looking at my watch, and it's just, you have to practice not getting involved with the numbers, and it's killer. Like I say as a coach, like if you can get through a training block or let's say the first 8 weeks of a training block, not be staring at your watch, not be staring at your HRV, not be looking at your heart rate, like you can have a great race. But you have to do that. You have to do that because, if you start, and everybody does it, you get through your runs and you're like, okay, you're looking at your heart rate here, you're comparing it to your pace, and then you're trying to put in a graph and you're trying to formulate where you're going to be in 24 weeks. Like it's maddening. It's maddening. And I think that's like the thing with the detriment. Sorry, I'm taking this on a tangent. This is the detriment today for runners or humans, because we want so much control. We want to be like in control of what we're doing, but like you can't do that in the running world. You cannot try to control day to day what's going on with your outcomes and what's going on with your performances and what's going on with your training. Like you really have to, we say, Jesus, take the wheel. Like we got to let him go. And we got to just go with it when it comes to training. So like just letting go is the way. It is the way.
So on your end, does that just mean like having some wiggle room within zones? Does that mean like being okay with pace prescriptions being plus or minus a certain amount? What does that look like on your end?
Yeah, it's a lot of feel-based stuff. So like on my coaching style, almost everything is feel-based. So like, let's say if I'm saying threshold effort, I will give pace as a guide. But I always say go by effort. So what that protects everybody from is it protects you from getting outside of your zone that you're capable of running. And to kind of get into that and to add on to what I was previously saying, we keep that wiggle room. We keep that plus and minus to not get too wrapped up in it. We have pace as a guideline, but we stick to effort. And the reason why you do that is when you're, let's say for simple math, let's say a 15-minute 5K runner, very fast, but just for numbers purposes, that means they're running 3 minutes per kilometer. And they're going to do a race-specific session that's 5x1K with 60 or 90 seconds standing, which is a pretty standard, like, hey, I'm going to see what I can run a 5K in. And it's going to give you a good idea. And he or she has the fitness of 15 minutes, 3 minutes per kilometer. If you go into the session, you're looking at your watch and you're cracking 250, 255, and you're like, okay, this year is my year. I'm running hot. I'm going to run 14. Like, this is my year. But you're a 15-minute guy. You're going into next week. You think you're hot, but you're carrying fatigue because you're going too fast in the workout. So it's always taking a step back. So the 15-minute guy should have been maybe running 3 minutes, 3:05 to start, then got a little bit faster, and he's going to run 14:50 next week. But instead, we're trying to play out of our league. And that's, if I could break down the biggest issues with training, it's just you're training at a level that you're not currently at. And why I say this is because when we look at pace, we start to immediately correlate that with results. And, if I'm running 450, then next week you know what I mean? That means if 450 is easy, then 430 is my race pace. We're constantly registering numbers as a evidence to our progression and evidence to how our success will be. And when we do that, we get into worlds of trouble, worlds and worlds of trouble, because we're control freaks, and we want to prove to ourselves that we are something. And I do it too. Like, I want to run a hard workout, and then if I'm feeling good in the workout, I'm going to push to another level because I wanted to say, okay, no, I'm not this fast, I'm that fast. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Does that change at all when you get athletes who are doing races? So if it's like race day, you're coaching me. I'm like, Max, all right, I got my 10K here. I think I can hold a 445 roughly. It's like, should I be glancing at that? Should I be really worried about it in the first half of the race? Like, should I have a screen that doesn't have pace on it? What do you normally say?
So I support the watch on race day, 100%. Okay. Like, because race day, you're not gonna get what you want. You're gonna get what you get. Like, that's the truth. Like, and at the end of the day, like, I'm here to get my athletes to their race. Like, I'm here to say, hey, like, Ben, like, 445, that sounds good. And obviously, if I think you're capable of it, I'm gonna say, hey, let's go for it. But if you start the race and you're at 450 and you're not having the best day, then you're going to stay there. That's just it. And obviously, in any world, we're aiming to have the first 50% of the race with a little bit in the tank. Yeah. If I think 445 is reaching it a little bit, I'll say, hey, let's go first 3K at 450 and then start to cut down as we feel good. And that applies to all distances. So for the first 2K and a 5K, we're going to stay a little conservative. For the first 21K in a marathon, we're going to stay a little conservative, and that applies to all distances. But you can use your watch on race day.
Yeah. What about heart rate?
Heart rate's another one of those, like, I think, is it a good metric when it's combined with other stuff, like other biomarkers and feel? But I mean, a race isn't a race of heart rate. And one of the best runners I ever, a very funny side story. I'll add it later, but I'll start getting into heart rate. Heart rate's great. I mean, it's good when it's combined with other metrics. You can tell what your body is saying to you that day based on the way it's reacting and the way you feel. Sometimes, I have a very, very, very low heart rate when I train. And, like, I'll have a lot of people come up to me, like, or not come up to me, but they'll say things. They'll be like, oh my God, like, you did this pace at this heart rate. And my heart rate max is like 180. Some people it's 210. Some people it's even higher. So for me, like, a threshold effort's like 160. And so I'll be
This is how I am.
You're a low heart rate guy?
Yeah. Yep. My max is probably 185 if I'm very fresh, and, like, if I'm not fresh, I'm not getting over 175.
Yeah. See, and it's one of those things. And sometimes heart rate can be tricky because sometimes heart rate can be really high because we're fatigued. Also, heart rate can be low because we're fatigued.
Yeah.
Heart rate can be low and high if we're, according to our diet. Like, so it's so tough to use it in a good manner. Like, I can't tell you the last time that I'll use heart rate when it's like I have a strong run. I feel really good. I don't feel suppressed at all, which is important. I can access my high gears, and it's low, green. If my heart rate's low and I just feel like and I run strong, it's still a strong run. I'm running good pace, but I just feel steady. I don't feel like I don't got that crack. That's not a good sign. You know what I mean? Overall, sometimes my best runs, I'll get out the door, bink, hit my watch, and I'll maybe pace. Okay, I'm at this pace. I'm at 4 minutes. and I'll notice I'm usually at, let's say, 140. Today I'm at 146, but I'm saying to myself, but I feel like I can really go. This is a great sign. Like maybe my nervous system has calmed down enough to allow myself to be recruiting more muscle and more blood's flowing, and I'm really cracking. So it's a tough metric. And the story, super funny. I'll never forget. So I'm based in Niagara, and there's my training partner is Kenyan, and he's a crazy runner, like crazy. And I was super lucky to train with them. And last summer was the first summer we trained together, and like their running culture is in a different world. It's like hockey for us, but it's very competitive. It's also very competitive. And I'll never forget, we'd been training for like 4 months, and he had this big blue A6 watch from early 2000s. It was an inch off his wrist. And I'll never forget, he's looking at my watch, and of course I'm the tech guy with like the cool super new watch, and like $1,000. And I'll never forget, he comes up to me and goes, man, people keep asking me at work because they know I'm a runner, like, oh, what's your heart rate? He goes, what is that? Like, what is heart rate? Heart rate wasn't a register. He didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing for him. And I had to explain. I was like, and it hit me at that time. And this guy, he's a 218 marathoner, incredible, tough guy, like an amazing runner. And I'll never forget. Yeah, he asked me this, and he goes, yeah, what's heart rate? And I had to stop and say to myself, like, okay, I have to explain to the best marathoner that I've trained with, or the strongest marathoner, if you might, what heart rate is. And we're in this world of like Instagram and social media where we're like, heart rate zones, this, that. And it's like, oh my, like we've lost the plot in some parts of that.
Yeah. I think, that's the challenge. Is like with heart rate, it's obviously objective, but the baseline is always shifting, which is the issue.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's like based on your fatigue, based on environmental factors, it's just going to change where you're at. But the nice thing is it is, even if it is varying, it's at least a fixed number.
For sure. I agree with you.
Where it's like, and primarily the way I use heart rate is to cap people at effort.
Yeah.
And so like,
that's safe. I like that. No, I like that.
Yeah. But again, the issue is like, okay, if it's 90 degrees out Fahrenheit and it's, and I'm giving somebody zone 2, they might be like zone 2 within 30 seconds of the workout starting.
Yeah.
So there are instances where that gets really tough, but like generally at least, and that's where like, I think people probably, I'm guessing people in the running world, there's people who don't love the prescription of just like language for like prescribing effort, like an easy run, like a moderate run, like whatever we want to like say it. Mm-hmm. But I do, that's not exclusively, but like that's my primary way of prescribing CrossFit work for people is through effort, because of all the factors at play, it becomes too confusing and there's too much that gets lost. Whereas if people always have their sense of effort with them every day. For sure. So it's like, that's like the thing that is, it's the most comprehensive and the most reliable. And if you can, and it also has the most benefit to like, there's no benefit in you knowing what zone 2 is.
Yeah.
On race day, where there's always benefit for you knowing how hard you're working and how long you think you could sustain that for.
And it's so accurate. And effort is so accurate, and we get out of tune with our bodies when it comes to that, because our bodies know our effort. And of course we can get away from that, but we get away from that because of these metrics that we think dictate our performance. And I had seen a study that was shown when they were talking about threshold and lactate testing. And, we see the professional runners of today doing a lot of threshold work and consistently taking their lactate meters and taking their lactate. But it had shown that you could consistently find your quote unquote lactate threshold just by feel better than following a lactate meter, like measuring it, okay, higher, so on and so forth. So I think it's a great thing for your athletes, and it's music to my ears as a coach to hear that another coach that's going effort based, because not only that, you're also setting them up for success in the future. When they might not be working with yourself or somebody to guide them, they have this in their toolbook, their tool case, and they can use it in the future.
Yeah. So for you, above like saying a run is easy, like what are your, like, take me up through like the levels of effort. Like how do you typically write that for somebody? It's like, okay, what if easy's like, mid zone 2 for a super experienced runner? Like just take me up through, like, what is maybe your next step, and what do you typically word that as? What does that look like when in an athlete's program?
Yeah. So if we're not using distances, I would say there's recovery. Recovery is the first.
That's like zone 1, maybe.
Yeah, it'd be zone 1. It'd be about zone 1, just meandering around.
Yeah.
Zone 2 is, for me, just what I consider just aerobic fat burning effort. In zone 2, I would call easy. And I always keep that effort base, just because our brains know when we start to burn a little bit of carbohydrate and when we start to cross that aerobic kind of ceiling.
Max, that happens at like zone 1 for me.
You're always burning a bit of sugar.
I'll speak for myself. I won't throw a Paige under the bus, but yeah,
she definitely is.
We're sugar burners. Yeah.
Sugar burners. And then we get into steady. We get into moderate, and then that's like you're starting to pick up into, you're getting towards, you're burning a little bit more carbohydrate. You're moderate, then you're getting into, let's say, your marathon efforts. Then you get into threshold, kind of sandwich tempo between that. Then you're getting into like 21K to 15K efforts for most. And that's roughly, for the average Joe, around, like, let's say 160 BPMs, roughly. And that's where you start to feel, it's when you feel fast, but you don't feel like you're losing steam. And if that's the best way to prescribe or to describe that effort, it's where you're like, okay, I'm fast, but I'm not burning matches. You're not cooking anything. And then above that, I would just say VO2 max, and that's where you're just quote unquote zone 5 as well, is when you're at the point where your body's trying to not fall apart. It's true. That's where I think of VO2 max. Like, you are falling apart, and you're just trying to breathe as heavy as possible to not fall apart. Mm-hmm. That's you're at the point where you're accumulating lactate, and you're burning matches, so on and so forth. And we basically never want to be there. For the average listeners, we don't want to spend too much time there when we're not supposed to be there.
Yeah. Is that primarily a like weeks leading into a comp or a race type?
The VO2 max stuff?
Prescription? Yes. Or and if not, when do you give that?
Yeah, it's the weeks leading up to a race. So you're spot on there. And just for everyone listening, why you don't do that earlier in a prep is because running is like a layered cake, and each of them complement each other, but they also complement each other in a compounding manner. So it's like making pizza. And when you make pizza, you need to make the dough, which is just your zone 2. It's your hanging around. We start off with the dough, right, when we're making pizza. We put the sauce on there, which is a little bit of threshold. Okay, nice. Get the cheese on there, which is now we're getting into specific phase, which is getting used to what that running is like. And then we're putting the pepperoni on, which is the VO2 stuff. And the big reason I put it in that order is we need to understand that, the pepperoni and the cheese, they come last, because if you put the pepperoni on the cheese before the dough, it's not happening. And they all accentuate each other, because if you're doing VO2 max weight work at the end of a program, it's raising your VO2 max, which is just your basically physiological ceiling of fitness, of cardiorespiratory fitness. When you bring that up, you're bringing everything with you. So you can gain fitness by doing VO2 max work on week 1, but you're not bringing the rest of the stuff up with you. So, and when I say it's a compounding thing, if your VO2 max increases by 10%, you're bringing everything with you. So there's big gains to be had there, but it's in proper timing and such where it's successful.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't yet?
No, I think I've covered. You've asked for really good questions. Thank you. I appreciate that. No. I think you've hit most of the spots that I think are important in today's running world. I think just to add on to all of the, and I think this applies to anybody that might listen to this podcast from my space or your space. And I think it's my message to runners in general is just to not forget what running is all about. And with the last few years of running becoming very popular on Instagram and social media, which is an amazing thing for the running world and the sport in general, but it also, of course, has its drawbacks that attention and gives to anything, where we can get a little bit too caught up in maybe the not so pretty parts of the sport, where it comes into chasing numbers and chasing performance or comparison, where it gets a little dicey, and it can affect the entry level runners and the people who are getting into it. And I think to the entry level runners or the people who are interested in the space is to find somebody that has been around in the space for a little while and talk to them. And whether that be a coach or a friend that that's been running around the block for years, talk to somebody that is knowledgeable, that has a good relationship with it, because whoever you do communicate with as a mentor, and I think this applies to any athletic space, their relationship with said sport will reflect onto you. And I think with it being a growing sport, more guidance is needed in a large and mostly unregulated sport like running.
Well, thank you, Max. Yeah, you mentioned your handle earlier, Max Runs.
Max Runs.
Anywhere else that you want to send people?
Max Runs on Instagram. That's the place to find me. And yeah, that's it. That's all. Thank you again, Ben. That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll have to do it again in the summertime when you're getting ready for your 10K, right?
There you go. I'll let you know when I sign up for one.
Very good. Thank you again, Ben.
Yeah, for sure.
See ya.